Welcome to the Edgar Rice Burroughs mini podcast number 11. These mini podcasts are meant to supplement the full-length ones I do with Jess Terrell and Scott Stewart, in which we usually discuss one of Burroughs' novels at length. My name is Tim DeForest. I'm the author of several books on what I refer to as pre-digital pop culture, such as old-time radio shows and pulp magazines. Right now, we're using these mini podcasts to do a chapter-by-chapter analysis of the 1912 novel Tarzan of the Apes, and we're up to chapter 3. Now, be warned that I will be including spoilers, both of this novel and occasionally of later novels in the series. I realize that most of you listening are doing so because you're already fans of Burroughs' work, but I would suggest that you take a few moments to reread chapter 3 of Tarzan of the Apes before continuing to listen to this podcast. Now, that chapter, titled Life and Death, shows us how John and Alice fare in their new jungle home for a little over a year before they come to a tragic end. In a lot of ways, they don't do badly at all. John manages to build a nice cabin, complete with a door with eventually a, quote, unique wooden lock, unquote. This is another Chekhov's gun, by the way, setting up that the apes would end up locked out of the cabin even after the Claytons were killed. Further mention of the books, including children's books brought along for the child they knew they would have, is another example of establishing a future plot point, as is the fact that John keeps his diary in French. Now, I'm not sure the chapter is clear about exactly how long they were stranded there before their deaths. We know that Lady Alice lived a year after their son was born, and that John was killed within hours after she died. But prior to that, we're only told that John was caught outside without his rifle because he had, quote, grown careless after months of continued safety, without saying exactly how many months that was. Also, Alice's pregnancy was really only hinted at previously, but we need to remember that she was apparently 9 months pregnant when they encountered the ape and she came close to getting killed. Tarzan was born that same night, and it was at this point that Alice entered her personal world of delusion. Now, John didn't do badly by his wife in this chapter. He kept her safe. Judging from the lion and panther skins he used to decorate the cabin, he was a pretty good shot and a skilled hunter. He managed to keep their larder full of meat and fruits, and he managed to figure out how to build a sound cabin, including figuring out from scratch how to make hinges for the door. Perhaps he did too good a job, since he eventually felt safe enough to get caught outside without his weapons. Now, my wife Angela is still buddy reading the novel along with me, and she was wondering about their nutritional needs. She was wondering if John was also busy gathering edible fruits and wild vegetables to make sure she and Alice were getting all the vitamins and such that they needed. Burroughs is keeping the pacing fast here. This is appropriate because he doesn't want to spend too much time in a novel about Tarzan before actually getting to Tarzan himself. It would be interesting, though, to have a little more detail about what John needed to do to keep himself and his wife healthy as well as safe, especially after Alice began nursing the baby. These details aren't necessary to the story, and Burroughs was wise in not trying to make this chapter an extended version of the Swiss Family Clayton. But you can't help but wonder about these things if you're going to do a chapter-by-chapter analysis. And I wonder if a lack of proper nutrition was a factor in Alice's eventual breakdown. Now, the encounter with the ape is quite exciting, and Alice, though this represents her mental breaking point, is really quite amazing. Despite her fear of guns, she manages to plug the ape and save her husband's life. Now, if I can do a little bit of armchair quarterbacking here, though, I have to say that John did drop the ball in regards to teaching Alice to use a weapon. I realize that to conserve ammo, she could have done no more than dry fire a weapon under John's tutelage. But John really should have encouraged her to do this despite her fear. She came within a hairbreadth of getting killed because she didn't know how to work the bolt on the rifle. Now, to be fair, though, it might not have occurred to a Victorian man to do anything other than protect her himself. And for the most part, as I said, John does acquit himself well. He wasn't a carpenter, and occasionally he gets stuck on a problem while building the cabin, such as how to make hinges for the door, but he always figures it out. Burroughs had mentioned in chapter 1 that John had army training. Perhaps he went to the Sandhurst Military Academy, which would have meant that he probably took some engineering courses. If so, this might have given him some training related to building the cabin and a frame of reference on which to figure out how to do so. Burroughs is being a little merciful to Alice by giving her that mental breakdown, giving her a year or so of relative happiness before her death. It's kind of nice that she didn't have to suffer through a year of hellish jungle survival, but rather lived in her own, oh, John, how nice to be back in London world before she died. Both John and implicitly Burroughs come to think of this as a mercy. Now, what did Alice die of, though? Burroughs doesn't tell us, and again, it's not necessary for us to know that particular detail. Disease, poison insects, or a myriad of other probable causes are handy, and we had simply come to the point in the story where it was required for her to die. But poor John, though. By this point, the baby is a year old and probably had already been fed mashed up fruit and perhaps meat broth, aside from mother's milk. Had he lived, John probably could have figured out how to care for him, though leaving a baby alone in the cabin while he went hunting would have been a terrifying thought. But at that moment, we see at the end of chapter 3, he is in complete despair, quite understandably, of course. The note in his diary, "My son is crying for nourishment. Oh, Alice, Alice, what shall I do?" is one of the saddest sentences ever written. So that's it for this time. Next time we'll look at chapter 4, in which we'll meet the apes of the tribe of Kershak. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Keep an ear out for our full-length podcast. And my name is Tim DeForest. Please visit my blog at Comics, Old Time Radio, and Other Cool Stuff, which will also provide you with a link to my Amazon.com authors page. You're welcome to buy my books and make me wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice. And if you are enjoying our podcast, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes, which we understand would help us garner more listeners. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.